Hello and welcome to another edition of the Binge Chicken Reviews. We're back after a little time off during the year to review some of our favourite television shows. And we are talking today about the Book of Boba Fett, the first episode of which dropped just 2 days ago. So very excited to talk about this new show. And I'm here with Lo. How are you, Lo?
I'm good, thanks. Glad to be back after a very, I wouldn't say brief hiatus.
Hiatus, yeah, it's a good term for it. So we're talking about Book of Boba Fett. So I thought we would start by getting your overall thoughts and feelings of the first episode, and then we can sort of dive into some interesting moments through the episode. But just first of all, overall, how did you feel about it?
When we watched it finished, and I kind of went, "Oh, wait, that was it." Like, where I want more. So I think overall, I did enjoy it. What were your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I really liked it. I thought it was a good sort of setting the scene opener. I think it's interesting trying to strike the balance between being a continuation of what we got from The Mandalorian and being its own show. So I've seen some comments of, we don't necessarily know the character motivations yet, but I'm sure that will become clearer over the next few episodes. But I thought it was a great first episode. Cool. Okay. Well, let's jump into some of the sort of the key moments from the episode, and I guess it's best place to start is probably the start of the episode when we got the first set of flashbacks. We saw Kamino, we saw Geonosis with Boba Fett and his father's empty helmet, and then we saw him getting out of the Sarlacc. So, how did you feel about this sort of way to start the episode, and was that sort of how you imagined, I guess, him getting out of the Sarlacc? About how we sort of learned about that part of his history?
Yeah, I know that you were very excited that they started off with that, because you had been saying that if you were the showrunner, that you'd start off with showing him getting out of the Sarlacc pit, which makes sense. I mean, there was a lot of questions around that. I mean, I still have questions, but they showed him escaping. That's that. I thought the flashbacks to him as a kid were good as well. And just opening, I guess, with those flashbacks kind of gives maybe people who aren't as familiar with Boba Fett a bit of an idea of who he is and where he's come from prior to him being on The Mandalorian. And I totally forgot that at the end of Mandalorian, we had that. It was a post-credit scene, right? Of Boba entering Jabba's palace. So I forgot that I didn't even think that's where it would be starting. For some reason, I thought it would be starting, I don't know, pre-Mandalorian. I don't know. But it was good. It was a good opener. I hooked you in.
Yeah, which I think is, I mean, it's essentially what we got. It was that balance of, okay, so we first saw him sitting in that Bacta tank, which I thought that was also interesting. We didn't really see him struggling as much with issues in The Mandalorian. So the fact that he's kind of struggling with, I guess, the after effects of the Sarlacc and therefore needing Bacta therapy, I thought was interesting. But to go straight into how he survived the Sarlacc, I thought that's the question everyone had was, how did he get out? How did he survive? They wanted to see that. So I thought that was a good way to start it.
Yeah, they nipped that in the bud pretty early.
Yeah, that's right.
Good. And interesting with the Bacta tank stuff as well, because I'd be intrigued to know why he needs it. I feel like we haven't had that question answered as of yet. So I feel like as we go through the show, maybe we'll get more and more of those flashbacks to take us to where he is now.
Yeah. I guess if we follow through the episode, let's do the present day plot first, and then we can sort of talk about what's happening in those flashbacks. But I guess the biggest scene in the present day plot was he heads into Mos Espa, which I thought was really cool to see Mos Espa again after episode 1. And he goes to see, so I'll just see if I get the name right, Garsa Fwip, who's like a Twi'lek running this cantina, the sanctuary in Mos Espa, which I thought was quite cool. Interesting character. We see Max Rebo again, who survived the barge as well, like Bib Fortuna. So we see that they're still alive and kicking. I think it's interesting. I think this is sort of setting the scene for this plot, and I said to you the other day when we were talking about this, it's more political or maneuvering and kind of relationship dynamics rather than The Mandalorian, which was very much, here is an episode with a problem, here is a resolution, move on. It's more okay, we're starting to get these characters, we're going to start to see what's happening in town. he gets confronted by the ambushes as well. So we see what the fallout from that is as well.
Yes. I did like, I know, sorry, we're jumping around a little, but I did like the opening, present day opening with him welcoming, not guests, but
Local,
I guess people paying
you'd say, like,
tribute
yeah.
to him as the new mob leader. And I thought that was a funny scene. That was a good way to establish the characters. Because I mean, I know that we've met Boba and Fennec in The Mandalorian, but we got like very much a one-sided view of them.
Yeah.
I think. So this actually gave us a bit more of those layers. So there was that bit of comedy there. And, you know, we can see already that Boba's not going to be like an absolute dictator. So that then again gives us more, I guess, of his personality. I don't know if that would be surprising for some. I don't know. And that Fennec's very much well, no, this is how it should be done. Like, this is how it used to be done. This is how it should be done. And Boba's like, well, like, I don't want to do things the same way, which I'm sure will lead to tension later on as well. Between those two, but they're a good pairing. And yeah, it was great to see more of Mos Espa. There's always a cantina scene, always.
Yeah. Which was interesting actually, because apparently my first instinct was, this doesn't really look like the Mos Espa we saw in episode 1, but apparently the guy who designed the setting for Mos Espa in this episode did the original concept art for episode 1 as well. So
That's cool.
So it feels like, and look, it's quite natural. It's 40 years after episode 1. The town can expand, and we might have only seen part of it in episode 1, and this is, you know, the main city center or something. So I really liked the look of it. It's different. I don't like when we just get the same thing over and over in Star Wars. So I like the bit more of a, you know, it's the plateau, and then the valley in the middle of the town was quite cool. Speaking of the scene with them paying tribute, I really liked, I don't think we got the name for the character, the major domo representing the mayor, who had the gumption to sort of say, well, actually, I'm not going to give you tribute. You have to give me something if you want the mayor's favor. And, you know, there's so that's already setting up. And I sort of suspect that's linked to the ambush, that because Fett didn't give them anything, that's what those people were after. So we're already starting to get a bit of that, okay, here's potentially the antagonist for the show that he'll have to deal with and get onto his side, curry favor with. So, an interesting power dynamic already.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see who the mayor actually is. As well. But yeah, I do think the assassins that were sent are probably linked to that plot. I can't imagine that they would be introducing another enemy so quickly in the first episode when it's already kind of established that the mayor probably feels like they're better than Boba Fett, and that they felt offended because he didn't actually pay them tribute. And, you know, I don't know, the character, the mayor's representative, was very, not dry, but just the way that they were like, oh yeah, you'll expect another visit soon. But very kind of detached from what he was saying. Like, yeah, you do you, mate, whatever.
There was a lot of good humor in there as well, with Fett saying, you know, I thought they were supposed to pay me, not the other way around, and things like that. I thought that worked out quite well. So, no, quite enjoyed that. I guess the transition then from after that ambush attack does take us into our flashback plot, which interestingly was actually, I think, more of the episode was the flashbacks in the present day. So it does beg the question of whether the main plot will actually be in the past, sort of explaining how Fett gets to how he is, or in the present, or it'll be sort of a blend of the two. But what did you make of that sort of development of plot with Fett kind of getting pulled out of the Sarlacc, being captured / rescued by the Tuskens because they kind of give him some sustenance to get him going again? And then I guess we get the raid on the homestead, we get the water, digging for water, and then the killing of the, I don't know what we call it, the sand beast as well. Seems sort of a bit of the plot. So what did you make of that sort of development over the course of the episode?
I think it's cool having the two plots. I liked having the present day versus the past. And if the whole series kind of ran like that, where we've got the both plots running at the same time kind of thing, like we're getting almost like two separate shows in one. Not really, but, you know, those two different very different storylines. I'd be okay with that because I think it's nice. Obviously, I think we'll get to a point where it's all present day. Depending on how many episodes we have.
I think it's 6, but I wasn't sure. I think I saw something that maybe there was 8, so I might have got that wrong. I thought it was 6.
But no, I didn't mind that at all. It was interesting seeing that post-Sarlacc pit period. I guess it'll be interesting to see where he gets, like, what happens. And I think similar to The Mandalorian, I feel like these flashbacks are giving us those single adventure kind of type episodes. Because like this episode was the Tusken Raiders. Obviously, well, he got his armor taken by the Jawas.
Yeah.
And then taken by the Tusken Raiders. But we saw that the Tusken Raiders plot not necessarily finished, but it had a nice like balance to it where he gets taken, he tries to escape, he gets taken again, and then he saves the young Tusken Raider from the sand creature, and then they respect him. And we see that kind of not as I said, it's not necessarily finished. We probably still see more of the Tusken Raiders in the next episode. But it was like nicely balanced out, and it was kind of an adventure in one. And the episodes of The Mandalorian were very much there's that long objective, like that long time objective with like Baby Yoda and things like that, Grogu. But there was also those single adventures per episode. And I feel like maybe the flashbacks are giving that single adventure per episode. And then we have the ongoing present day plot, which will take up like the whole of the episodes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And what I'm interested as well with is that when we first see Boba Fett in The Mandalorian, he has a gaffy stick. So I think the Tusken Raider leader had a similar gaffy stick when they were fighting.
Okay.
And then Boba Fett has one in the first episode of season 2 of The Mandalorian. So I'm thinking, as you're saying that, I'm thinking that, yeah, you're right. Like the Tusken Raider plot of him trying to escape, fighting them, whatever, seems quite resolved now that he's kind of earned their respect. I almost wonder if he's now going to be sort of an honorary member of the tribe, and that's why he'll get the gaffy stick and all that sort of thing. And with the raid, we see them painting on that logo on the house. I almost wonder if that's quite deliberate because they might end up being the antagonists in the flashbacks and maybe even the present, where we'll kind of be like, oh, we know that logo now, and we'll see them on, we'll see it on their ships or we'll see it on their armor or something. And that it might become a conflict between the Tuskens and the Raiders. I don't know, but that's certainly the only element I can think of in the flashbacks that could lead to a longer plot. But you could also be right. It could be that we've got the monsters being killed. He's got their respect. He'll get some provisions and they'll set him on his way in the next episode. And that will be that. And he'll do something else in the flashbacks. But it's 5 years to fill in. So I don't know how much they're going to try and show us or not. But certainly there are a lot of possibilities for what we'll get in the next few episodes. But that sort of takes us through all of the plot. I just wanted to get what we'll do. We'll have sort of a discussion around what we think's still to come. We've sort of already done that anyway. But I think first I'd get from you. Was there anything in the episode that you didn't like?
When we first watched it, and we've watched it twice now, doing our research. But when I first watched it, I didn't quite enjoy the fight scene with the assassins. It felt very choreographed and stylized. Like it didn't feel organic. And sorry, you can't see me, but I'm putting inverted commas around that. I don't know. It just felt slow and very paced. And I was like, is this because of the age of the characters or something? I don't know. That was my first initial thought. And I was like, no, I think it's a style choice, but I will explain that in a second. What did you think of that? I know you had thoughts too.
I agree. My first instinct was it felt quite slow. And I think I've seen a lot of comparisons between that and Boba's fight in the Gunslinger, I think is the name of the episode that he first majorly appears in The Mandalorian, which was where he's, smashing stormtroopers quite fast and doesn't seem to be suffering from any effects of anything that would require back to treatment. So it's going to be interesting to see whether that sort of gets explored, why there's that issue now that he's back on Tatooine. The fight didn't seem as slow the second time we watched it. I actually thought it was all right. Like clearly the assassins were trying to just surround him and stab him and get him subdued. So I didn't have as much of an issue with it the second time. I loved the rocket that he just takes the guy out with. I thought that was just such like overkill, which was so good. But yeah, no, I agree. I think that was definitely, well, it's maybe not like, the worst quote unquote element of the episode. I don't think there was anything that was that bad. It was probably the slowest part or the strangest part in that sense. Yeah.
I did enjoy as well when he was like to Fennec, like, bring them back alive. I mean, he said alive, and she caught two of them. Was like, well, I only need one.
Yeah.
And pushed the other one off the roof. I was like, oh, brutal. I enjoyed that. But in saying that I think, and I was saying this to you after we watched it yesterday. I do think maybe that was a style choice rather than like that fight feeling slow. Because I did say to you, as we were watching it the first time, like all I could think was Power Rangers. And that was the vibe I got from the show. Is that like that late 80s, early 90s Power Rangers style show where it's like the good guys versus the villains. And the fight scene definitely made me think of that. So I'm like, maybe that's the style they're going for, because overall with the whole episode, it felt very like Star Wars has this really great ability to, even though like we're in, and not necessarily they're doing this with the TV shows like Mandalorian and Boba Fett. I'm not going to talk about the films at all, but with the shows that they're producing, I feel like they have this great ability to, it's still like we're still escaping to a fantasy world, but we're still separate from it in a way that they're still using like the puppets and things like that they used in the like original films. So it still feels like it's a show, film, whatever, from that time period. Like they've really held on to those classic Star Wars elements.
Like the Sand Monster. The Sand Monster,
like the Sand Monster, and like
motion. Yeah.
Yeah, the robot in the Jabba's palace who was introducing all the guests.
Which I didn't realize, but he was in episode 6. So he was the robot that was torturing the robots while 3PO is kind of going like, what's going on? And he's like, disintegrate. He's like, we need a protocol droid since our master disintegrated the last one. It's that droid. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I didn't even realize that. And
that's
he's,
awesome.
like you said, he's very like stop motion sort of fiddly.
Yeah. So even though it is like very much a modern production, it still feels modern. They've got those little elements that still makes it feel like purely Star Wars. And I don't know if that also then contributes to my idea of being like, it's like Power Rangers. But whatever they're doing real, like I think they like whatever style choices they're making and costuming design, things like that, like it's working. It's really working. Like I'm really enjoying it because it feels authentically Star Wars, but it also still feels like we're getting these new shows, new elements. It's a great blend, I think, of like our technology that we've got today plus the technology they used back then, and like amalgamating that and bringing it together. I enjoyed it. I want more episodes.
Well, speaking of the new technology being used, I think talking about the thing that I probably disliked the most of this episode, it's something that sort of followed me through Mandalorian and into this show, and it's probably a purely personal thing. And I think for me, it's just one of those things where whenever I see another example of it, it just triggers the frustration in me. So it's very hard for me to ignore and paste over. But for me, it's the fact that they're clearly using this filming technique, using the volume where it's this little stage and then they sort of fill in the background. And usually that works really well. Like, for example, when they're walking through Mos Espa or they're in Jabba's palace, those set pieces look and feel really great and really authentic. You look at even, the being in the Sarlacc, even the Tusken Raider camp and all that sort of stuff feels really authentic. The one moment in the episode that took me out of it, though, was when Boba Fett's trying to escape the camp the first time at night, and he runs away from the camp, and it's just flat nothingness, and there's no stars in the sky. Now, it could be, as I've seen suggested, it's a flashback. It's sort of done that way specifically to say that this is Boba Fett's memory, and this is, it's sort of the effects to show it's a flashback, which I can sort of accept. But at the same time, I'm just feeling like in that sort of scene, specifically because we know how it's filmed, it just takes me out of it, because I'm like, well, they're standing on a little sandy platform. They haven't put stars in the sky. Like, for me, I just look at it compared to, like, for example, Attack of the Clones, when Anakin goes out at night to save his mother, and you've got like him kind of traveling across the vistas on Tatooine, and you've got like the sky and the stars in the background, and like the sun setting and the blood red glow and all that sort of stuff. It looks really cool. It looks really authentic. And then you've got Boba Fett like running across the sand, and it's like blank sky, even though there wouldn't really be any clouds, so there should be stars. There's not even hills or rocks or anything around it. I'm like, just took me out of it a little bit, and I totally get that's purely just my perspective on it, and that's just something that sort of stuck with me through a few of the episodes of The Mandalorian that I can't quite shake. But I don't know, did it bother you at all, or not really?
I didn't sit. No, I have not noticed that at all.
Yeah, okay.
Like not at all. I don't know why that totally. Like I've totally missed that. I have to. Even when we watched it yesterday, I totally forgot to look. Like watched it for the second time, I totally forgot to look for it again. So I just get caught up with what's happening.
It's probably an utterly ridiculous thing, but that's just something I can't shake. And it's sort of, I guess my feeling on that as well is like when you go through the square in Mos Espa, which actually did a lot better job of it in this than in The Mandalorian, of having a lot of background characters and things going on. Like they had droids coming through the scene and stuff. I was like, okay, cool. It feels much busier and more real. Whereas, for example, when they went to Tatooine last time in The Mandalorian, it's very empty, which I feel like that's a choice to feel like it's all abandoned and worn down and all that sort of thing. I get that. But at the same time, I'm like, there's no background characters to make this world feel alive, which...
Yeah, I felt like that was more a choice in The Mandalorian, because I feel like it's meant to be like a Western, and always, like, not always, but traditionally with the Western genre, you're looking at those smaller towns that have a smaller population and things like that. And I felt like Mandalorian was more that, definitely that space Western. I know that Star Wars gets touted as being a bit of a space Western, but like the Mando was definitely that. Like even with the music, that's something that was missing actually with Boba Fett. The music is not the same. Like obviously, I'm not expecting it to be the same as Mandalorian, but that Mandalorian intro track is so iconic, and I just felt like there was missing music in this. I think, and that was one thing with the fight scene that also took me out of it. There was no track. Like, there was music behind it, but it was really faint. And I was like, oh, I feel like there should, like, it felt like that's something that was missing. So I don't know what's happening with the sound design. Not criticizing it. I'm sure, but I'll be interested to see where that goes as the series progresses. The music at the end over the credits, was actually quite good as well, with like the choir.
I like that pace.
But it took the whole episode for it to come through.
I wonder, so I was just gonna say, I wonder if I feel like they're very deliberately saying this is not The Mandalorian, therefore this is different music, but they've sort of deliberately done that, and then it's like, but you haven't brought in anything still iconic and like different. Like it's almost like, why deliberately make the music less recognizable or iconic just for the sake of differentiating? Like only do that if you've also got some great pieces to use for this. But as you said, like you have really faint music, so you clearly aren't using that music to sort of sit in people's minds, long term. So look, we'll see what happens. And like we said, like that last piece of music was really great. So we'll see what happens as the show develops.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the show developing, just before we wrap up, did you have any thoughts on where you think the season's heading? Any speculation or what you'd like to see dived into more with what we've seen so far?
No, I feel like I don't know much about Boba Fett and like his story, so I'm just along for the ride. And keen to see what happens. I like the character so far. I mean, I like Fennec as well. I feel like that episode, it was like only 35 minutes. I feel like we did not get enough of that episode for me to be like, well, I think this is going to happen, or I'm looking forward to this. I'm like, I just want more.
Can I pose a wild, crazy fan theory and see what your thoughts are on it? So one suggestion I saw, which I have zero faith of it actually happening, but I wanted to see how much you'd be interested in seeing it happen. Because we get the flashback at the start to Geonosis with Jango's empty helmet and the fact he's dwelling on how his father died, aka Mace Windu killing him. How open would you be to having Mace Windu in some capacity as a villain in the show? Not a villain, but like someone that trying to deal with.
I honestly don't think Samuel L. Jackson's going to be like, yep, you know what, I'll come back. No. Unless it was for his own show, I don't think so.
Yeah, I saw that suggested, and I was like, there's been speculation for years. They're like, well, he got his hand cut off, he fell out a window, but that happens to half the Star Wars characters that survive. So, we got Darth Maul got cut in half, and he came back. So that everyone's like, well, you could bring Mace Windu back, and
No.
what better to do that than to fight against Boba? But no, I just wanted to get your thoughts on it. I saw that, and I thought, it's not likely. But no, I think like we're saying, I think it seems much more likely we're going to get the mayor of the town is going to be the main antagonist in the present, and then maybe like
what if the mayor's Mace Windu?
Yeah, that'd be a twist. Mr. Windu is just chilling on Tatooine, just hanging out, running a town.
It wouldn't surprise me, but it wouldn't surprise me if the mayor was a character that is like not necessarily one that we've seen, but like a character that's well known in the Star Wars universe. Because I feel like they're very much. If the mayor was like, I feel like if the mayor was a character that was not was like a new character, we probably would have maybe been introduced to them by now. Having like the fact that they're hiding the identity of the mayor, like they haven't even named them the mayor, it's just the mayor. I find that interesting.
I think there's some speculation that in the trailer there's an Ithorian character, which is like the species with like the really big curved head. There's some speculation that that's the mayor, but I don't think that's confirmed at all. So you could be right. I mean, it's interesting, as you say, not having the mayor shown on screen in the first episode, referred to a couple of times, does build that mystery. I almost wonder if we're going to get something happening in the flashbacks, and then like at the start of the episode, there'll be something in the flashback with a character. Maybe it's going to be the head of the gang or something. And then in the present, we find out that character is now the mayor. And that could be the way because that would sort of make sense of why you're not showing the mayor, is that you want to have that context or familiarity built up through a flashback first. So
they want that reveal. Like obviously they're building to reveal, and that would make sense actually for them, if it being someone from Boba's past who ends up being there. That would make a lot of sense. Yeah.
Well, so overall, sounds like it was a great first episode. Hooked us back in for the second episode. It was interesting with this one that it didn't have sort of like a Baby Yoda hook at the end of the episode, but I don't think we needed that. I think there's plenty to get us back for the second episode.
Yeah, I agree. And also, just side note, if you haven't watched the Boba Fett documentary on Disney Plus, watch it as well, because it's 20 minutes, and it kind of goes into the history of the character. Not necessarily the history of the character, but like the making of like the costumes and things like that. And they discuss how like such a secondary character became so iconic, and how like they were surprised by that and things like. It's worth the watch.
Absolutely, yeah. We watched it after the episode. It's Underneath the Helmet, I think it's called.
It was interesting, and it was good looking at that. It actually does kind of give you the history, because it looks at episode 1 and 2. Episode 2.
Episode 2. Yeah.
With the baby Boba.
Daniel Logan. Yeah.
It was really interesting. It's definitely worth a watch.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining me for this, Lo. We'll be back next week to discuss the second episode, won't we?
Yes, we will.
No problem. Well, thank you everyone for watching along. Give us a like, give us your comments. What did you think of the episode? Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. The links are in the description below. We'll be back next week for the second episode. Bye for now.